Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I have long been a fan of your work, like long. I think it was actually Mahogany L. Brown who introduced me to your work. And towards the beginning of the pandemic, I guess, the beginning of the I don't know how to phrase time exactly. I had been teaching your poem Elegy quite a bit, along with this passage. Have you read For the Time Being by Annie Dillard?
Mm-mm.
It's a collection of essays, and she writes in it, there's a passage in which she says, there are no more sacred, more or less, basically, she says there were no more sacred times than these, and our times are no more sacred than anyone else's. The sacred is available to us at any moment, just as it was, to Buddha under the Bodhi tree. There's not a whit less of power under the tree in your yard. And pairing that with elegy and thinking about how there is just like so much of that like devotion to the sacred and everyday in your work, like across your body of work, which spans all of these different things. And I wondered if you'd been a religious child.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. Yeah, we were raised, my brother and I were raised going to church a lot with my mom, non-denomination Christian, but also we went to gospel and Baptist church a lot too. And so in that way, yes, we spent a lot of time in church and thinking about Bible passages, but not really just that. It was like watching our elders in worship. We spent a lot of time, but my dad was Orthodox Christian. He was raised culturally Orthodox Christian and was an atheist and super suspicious of organized religion. And so I think that mix, like he would ask us. My parents split up when I was young, but he would ask us, who's this Jesus guy anyway? Like, what's this so there's always like the asking of questions that felt like they were not the questions we were supposed to be asking in church. So I feel like both of those things shaped something of my mind and self. Yeah, that's such an interesting question. What made you wonder that?
I was just that what I was saying. There's just like something so like sacred and timeless about your poetry, but at the same time also really rooted in what's happening right now. It's not this sort of like forget the world, I'm walking around a pond sort of, which is what it is, but it's this sort of like, and as you described this idea of your two parents with their different points of view, and like to see them, I mean, it exists in your poetry in this way, and
that's interesting.
This questioning, but it's a questioning that's sort of like imbued with tenderness. And it's just like, it's beautiful. Yeah, that's really cool.
I've never I hadn't wondered about those things in relation to my writing before, but that's such a wonderful question. I think about childhood a lot, and I think about how I always thought of myself as like a pair of eyes that I feel like even when you just asked me that, I was thinking about people being filled with like spirit or the Holy Ghost in church, and like watching. And my mom played congas at one of the churches, and people would, kind of fall out in with spirit or in a moment of ecstasy. And I just felt like a pair of eyes watching, and kind of wondering always. I never thought that I was like that I could be perceived, which is interesting. But I was just, so that's so I'm gonna think about that question. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I felt like a pair of eyes. With this sort of, were you always writing? Were you always like aware that you were collecting stuff? I mean,
Yeah.
like material sounds so capitalist, like it sounds like it was this productive, but there is this sort of like porousness that I think people who are artists have, whether or not we use it immediately to create art. Were you creating art? I guess is the question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I was, you're talking about when I was little?
Mhm.
When I was little?
Like, I mean, before it was school.
Yeah, I think my mom was somebody who, we spent a lot of time outside. And I grew up in Southern California. And there were some really stunning, gorgeous landscapes or places that we had access to or were accessed by, and also where we grew up in Santa Ana mostly, but my dad was in LA for many years. There was like a lot of urban sprawl and like houses and then empty lots, a lot of dirt and glass. And so I say all that to say that I think when I think about what I was doing before I was schooled, I think I was always wondering like what was here before. I was really like, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I love digging in the dirt. Like that's what I think of, which I think now a lot about how that is writing for me. So I think I was making stuff, and we would like use the JCPenney catalog to make paper dolls, and like we were making stuff. We made games. We were always playing. We were playing a lot, and that feels like art making too. But my mom was going to say that she was somebody who's like, we couldn't say we were bored. We weren't allowed. That was a bad word. And she's like, this whole world. So there was a lot of just like when you're tired of doing one thing, like looking around and figuring what you're going to get into next, which all of those things I know are part of my kind of artistic or poetic sensibility, Yeah. Yeah. What about you? What were you up to before you were schooled? Were you making?
Oh man, I was an outside player too. We were very suburban. We lived outside of DC in this house that I thought was the most magical place. And now looking at it, it was like there were a lot of us living in a very small house with one bathroom. And my sister, who was a teenager, did not have the magical experience I was having as a 5-year-old. But it was like, yeah, it was a lot of outside. It was a lot of like trying to tear my clothes, by skidding on my knees, like just really climbing trees and looking for beauty. I had this one habit, which was I would take pokeweed berries, they grow on this red stem. They're these purple berries, and I'd crush them up into a bucket of water and then throw the bucket up and just watch it like fireworks and then do it again. And I would just do this again and again, and like whole afternoons would go doing that.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know what the parallel is between that and my creative practice now, but I didn't feel lonely. When I was in the presence of beauty, I felt a lot less lonely, and that was
yeah. That makes me somehow think of your first book cover. Right? Is that the one with the red?
Yes.
Dresses? Somehow that image made me think about that.
Yeah. The child mind is a thing. Like I think often with my kids, my sons are 15 and 21. How old are yours? Yours are littler, no?
Yes, 6 and almost 4.
Yeah. 4 is so great. The questions they ask. But I think like from when I was 9 until I was 25, I was trying to not be who I was when I was 9. And
Mm,
now, like, since I've been 25, I've been trying to get back to who I was when I
yeah,
was 9 in these ways,
yeah, yeah.
um, to, like, remove what I've been told I should see and think. And when you talk about being a pair of eyes, um,
Mm,
I think that, like, that's the work of the artist, right? To return to that
mm,
observer space, even when we're talking about our own memories.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, and to have what what I think about is a kind of something like a privacy of mind, right? Like there was a way that I felt um, so like I I was kind of alone, not lonely at all, but like just like filled up with my mind and questions in a way that we're like, and I think it's not surprising now that I'm calling it that because I've got these two little kids and we've been in the house not alone. Like the four of us have been in the house, you know, this apartment together. But I think about how much, I don't know if this is true, but it felt like I had a lot of time to just be quiet and play and watch and fiddle. And it's probably, I think I long for that. I long for that now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's that time in church. We're Muslim, so I grew up in the masjid. There would be like these long periods where the adults were talking and we were to sit quietly. And
Mm-hmm.
like really sometimes feel such a desire to sit in the back of a boring lecture. Like
Uh-huh.
because of that, sort of like to allow my mind to wander.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
No
Uh-huh.
one's watching me, just like,
Yeah. And then were there words or sounds or things that were like were they touching your imagination or mind as you were wandering? Do you remember?
I think sometimes it would come up. I don't remember. I love praying in Jamaat. So in Islam, you pray shoulder to shoulder. This is very COVID unfriendly, right? Like everyone's right up next to each other, and we have our motions that we move through and are led, through the surahs, the prayers that we're saying, and they're different depending on who's leading it. Um, but you're just all by yourself in there. You get to put your
Mm.
head down, and in this thing that you're talking about, the privacy of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I think too, like, this podcast is called United Against Silence, and the idea being that, all of us are sort of refusing silence and naming what we've experienced. Um, but actually, in a poetry workshop, in an art making workshop, it's that comfortable silence where the magic is happening, right? It's like when we're all sitting together, and there's this other kind of silence, right? That's like super productive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wondered sort of like, how do you create? Writing is like 10% writing and 90% like, for me, talking to myself in the mirror and wandering around. And, what are your rituals to get into that, to drop into that mind now?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think a lot of the time, I think I'm pretty scrappy. I'm pretty scrappy, and I think that's really because um, there's so much else that fills my time, especially with the kids. But even I've always worked a lot, um, and in my teens and 20s had a bunch of different jobs and a lot of waitressing and hostessing jobs among other things. But like, so I was like, I knew how to write on the bottom of a receipt and stuff it in my pocket, and so there's like a lot of that, like you hear something or something comes to you and write it down and keep it, and we'll find ways to push on language or ask questions from those scraps. But I think also walking, which I haven't done enough. Just something about a repetitive motion where suddenly I start to, I don't know, hear, it seems like the word, hear lines. And then I hold on to them and I'll just keep repeating them for like a mile or something. And then come home and I'll write it down on paper. And then I might spend months, asking questions that start from there, or an image. I think a lot in images, which maybe is obvious in my work, where I think there will be some kind of memory or a very specific detail from a memory that I kind of can't stop caring and wondering about. And the poem becomes the way to wonder a little, or kind of open the hem of the image and see what associative circuitry is in there, or what it helps me to learn or think. But I think that those are the two main ways that it happens for me.
Open the hem of the image. I love, love, love that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love too, like, when you were talking about being a pair of eyes, it was like, oh yeah, the images.
Yeah.
But then the images sort of bubble up and become a line then
Mm-hmm.
in language that you repeat. And I'm struck to, and maybe you were always this way, or maybe it's something that's sort of developed as your craft has grown, of like trusting it, to hear the line. I think so much of it is like we don't when we're teaching, there's like that, there is this like impulse for people to write in Shakespeare's voice or Hemingway's voice, or not trust the impulse. But it sounds like you recognize, oh, this is something that I'm being given as a gift from myself.
Mm-hmm.
Did that come recently, or is that, or like, wow, just talk about that.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I don't know. I know that I think about it a lot, like voice and coming to one's voice, or if not coming to it, just like letting it be and sharing it. I think about that a lot because I think about that with my students. And there's this amazing essay by James Baldwin called On Why I Stopped Hating Shakespeare, where he talks about like the difference between being in your voice or voices and imitating a voice. And I don't know how. I think I struggle, maybe less so in poems, but just in life. Like I struggle sometimes hanging on to my language when communicating with others. Like, meaning I feel like I speak in all language is metaphor, but like, I think imagery really helps me to speak in day-to-day conversations. And I feel like I'm often, kind of, as you can tell, like wandering in language, and I'm not quick and direct. And there's a way that I'm often find myself trying to translate toward someone else, which makes sense because you want to be understood. But I think the poems, I don't know, I can't remember if there was a time when I was trying to sound like somebody else. Probably, I would imagine that would have happened. But I think I'm so concerned with trying to express or communicate with some other realm or other possibility or something, that being in my language feels like the ladder to that. And so I think that's not one of my first or second or third questions,
Mm.
as it is in life. In life, I'm like, oh, did I say that wrong? Was I too right? You know, but in the poems, I think I have other questions, like, do I believe that? Is this true? What's the history of that? Whatever. But I think like asking about, like, am I sane? Is my voice whatever enough? Is not one of my questions. Does that make
right. Yeah, that makes
yeah.
beautiful sense, because I think there is like, of course, communication is important. You want to say the thing that somebody, totally. But also, a funny thing that's the case about early poems, I think, oftentimes, is that the product isn't forefront, right? It's the question that's forefront.
Yeah.
And so that, like, it's not for anybody else in these early moments. And I, like, as you then sort of begin to earn a living from your writing, there's a different pressure that comes to it, or can come to it. And I wonder, like, how do you defend it? Do you have to defend it? Or maybe defend isn't the right word, but like, like, that's the work. It's like having a baby and then being like, all right, baby, go make us some money. Like, like, it's just like, and there is a space, of course, between when something is written and.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I feel like, because poems, I don't know, I never thought that I would make money off of a poem or get paid for a poem to be published, right? That was just not in my, like, in the realm of possibilities for me. And I feel glad, I think. I mean, I don't know, maybe I don't know. I don't know. I think I feel glad about that. And so there's a way that the other kind of work that I do, or have done, those were the ways to make money, and there was a way that poems weren't. And so there's a kind of something freeing in that, I think. There's something else that your question makes me think, which is like, how to hold on to that. I don't know. There's something different about the beginning, where I didn't think I was going to have a book published, and then now, these years later, where I've got a few books and I've gotten support for my writing. None of it it wasn't expected at all. But now that has happened, I think right now I feel like, oh, I just want to have time to write, and I don't feel worried about, like, I want to write and I want to reach towards another truthfully and honestly. And that, so I don't feel like right now nervous about that, because the other part feels so urgent. But maybe I also don't have a new book out. So maybe when I do, I will feel nervous about it. Who knows? I don't know. But I just feel there's a way that the rush of capitalist making hasn't yet touched my poems yet. I mean, in a way that feels, I think that's true. I mean, sure, it touches it in the way that I'm fighting for time and I'm rushing here and there on the subway, but my expectation hasn't been one of money for the poems. And so I don't know. That's my honest answer right now. I feel like I might change it in a minute.
And but I mean, it's so beautiful. The poems are just the poems, right?
Mm-hmm.